Hi Group 2, welcome to week 3, and this week we're having a look at the literacy strand. Before we get into the content, just a few things that I'd like to remind you of, and that's firstly that our interactive collab for A1 is on Tuesday of this week at 7:30 Melbourne time. So if you're available, pop in and have a chat to us, and you can ask us your A1 questions. If you're not around that night, then the recording will be available for you. Just also bear in mind that census date is next Friday, so not this Friday coming, the next one following that. So if you need to juggle around units, I know you might need to change or drop or do whatever you need to do. So just make sure that you've got that done by Friday the 6th of April, so there's no penalties. You should have well and truly started A1 by now, and all of our readings over the last couple of weeks are there to support you in your understanding of literacy demands and how they play out in the classroom and how they are connected to the Australian curriculum. So this week's reading by Emmett is interesting because firstly, if you're having trouble sort of deciphering that full resources model that you need or you can connect to, for assessment 1, it breaks it down into a bit more detail than what's presented for you in the learning materials. So it's important that you go in. It's on page 208, and it talks in a little bit more detail about the value of being the code breaker, the meaning maker, the text user, and the text analysis. And it helps you to put it into perspective in terms of the demands, particularly things like they talk a lot about socio-cultural perspective because we're having a look at literacy. So literacy is sometimes a hard sort of strand to get your head around, because when we have a look at language, we can see that there's different parts of language that need to be learnt, and it's sort of more to do with the mechanics of language. And when we look at literature, we can understand that because we're looking at books and how literature forms and how we can analyse it and all of those sorts of things. But literacy is sort of the strand in the middle. So as it says in the corner here, which I'll just point my mouse over, literacy is interpreting and creating text and applying the knowledge from the above strands to your everyday purposes. So when you have a look at Emmett's reading, she talks a lot about, I thought there were some really interesting and important sentences like that competence in literacy not only entails how to read and write, but also identifiable with text types and genres, and you need to have that strategic knowledge to read social situations and understand that literacy is about cultural power, cultural knowledge and social power. So the point of obviously being able to read and write fluently is to be able to use it. And that's the purpose of the literacy strand, so that we're able to use the knowledge and use the understanding so that you can apply them in an everyday setting. And I think another interesting point that came out of the article was that a lot of the skills that are valued within the community are not always the skills that are pushed by schools. So maybe that needs to be better aligned. She talks a lot about collaborating, a little bit about critical thinking, and some about socio-cultural perspective. So if they are your demands, it's worth jotting down some notes. Your task for this week is to post a little bit like we did last week. So you're going to have a think about the demands. I've listed them all here for you again. And you're going to see if you can find evidence of them in the AC. Now I'm going to go to that right now. So just bear with me a moment and have a look at the literacy strand. I'm just going to get rid of this. Yeah, we can click to end that and move that out the way. Great, it worked. Okay, so here's literacy. So when you have a look, I'll just scroll back up. Okay, so we'll start with, we've got levels 4, 5 and 6, which are the ones we need for A1. We start over here with literacy, and it talks about text in context. So if you've ever listened to Tim Moss's podcast, he explains a little bit about that in detail. But from what I can see, when you have a look at text in context, I can already see evidence of critical thinking. So we can have a look here, and it says that we can see points of view, subjective language being objective, and the idea that things change in a certain context. And also There's sort of also some elements of sociocultural perspective because you have to understand that texts are in a context and that they show cultural relevance depending on the author and depending on how we interpret them. This is an obvious one. Interacting with others is obviously going to be all about collaboration. So you can see in those particular outcomes, they're all to do with working with others. I can see keywords in there like interpret ideas. You've got, connecting with other people's point of views and experiences. You've got participate in and contribute to discussions, use your interactive skills, all of those sorts of things. It then moves on to interpreting, analysing and evaluating, and throughout here, so you're going to have a look, but I can already see comprehension strategies which would relate to critical thinking, and I can see that over there too. And I can also see a range that I could probably use for multiliteracies or technology, because there are things, especially if you click on the elaborations, which you should always do because they give you much more information, you can relate that to technology as well. Let's have a click on one. Let's have a click on, see if we can find a good technology example. What about plan, draft and publish? Click on elaborations. There we go. So we're going to be creating some different texts. Digital resources are mentioned and images. So probably the elaboration didn't give us a great deal more, to be honest, but we can see from the initial outcome that we've got digital resources. There might be words like online. I can see the word software. Just these keywords are going to jump out at you. So have a look and see if you can make some connections to the AC yourself and share them with us on the DB. And I would really love, it says in our task that we should be commenting on other people's posts. So let's really try and do that this week. Let's see if we can not just be you guys posting and me answering. Let's see if we can try and make it a much more of a discussion and maybe comment on someone else's post or comment on my comment to you. Let's see if we can get a good collaborative learning experience going. Thanks, everyone.